promoting dialogue.
It is 6 p.m. in Dakar and Accra, 7 p.m. in Abuja. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. First, our headlines. Diplomatic officials from Nigeria and South Africa hold high-level talks in Abuja over recent wave of xenophobic attacks.
This xenophobic attack had gone beyond attack on criminals. We have record of Nigerians who have legitimate papers to remain in South Africa, yet they have been attacked.
Benin launches major overhaul of its legal system as President Wadr installs a new law reform commission.
The objective is to identify within the existing body of legislation provisions that may have become outdated because our customs and international agreements have evolved.
Senegal adopts first national language policy, paving way for greater use of indigenous languages in schools, and the Gambia unveils a multi-million-dollar fund to expand vocational training and support youth entrepreneurship. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Deborah Amour.
Thank you for joining us. We begin in Abuja, Nigeria, where diplomatic officials met with their South African counterparts to discuss the recent wave of xenophobic attacks targeting Nigerians and other African nationals in South Africa. The meeting comes weeks after a series of attacks forced hundreds of Nigerians to flee their homes, prompting evacuations and renewed concerns over the safety of African migrants living in South Africa. WADR's Abuja correspondent Yechenusa Setu reports.
The talks brought together Nigeria's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Shola Enikanulayi, and South Africa's High Commissioner to Nigeria, Bobby Moreau. Enikanulayi says Nigeria remains committed to its relationship with South Africa, but expects stronger action to protect Nigerians and other foreign nationals from xenophobic attacks.
This xenophobic attack had gone beyond, attack on criminals. We have record of Nigerians who have legitimate papers to remain in South Africa, yet they have been attacked. And we could see some mob actions, which we saw the police watching as if they are helpless to address this situation, which to us raises issues of state responsibility. It raises the issues of complicity.
Responding, South Africa's High Commissioner to Nigeria, Bobby Moreau, reaffirmed his country's commitment to protecting all lawful residents and strengthening cooperation with Nigeria to address the concerns raised.
President Ramaphosa and the government he leads have been unspoken against any intolerance, including xenophobia, racism, homophobia, violence, discrimination directed at individuals within our borders. President Ramaphosa has also been very firm on South Africa's sovereign right to enforce immigration laws, including to deal decisively with irregular migration and undocumented immigrants, including acts of criminality that is sometimes committed within our borders.
The two countries agreed to deepen collaboration on migration, security, and consular affairs while reaffirming their commitment to strengthening bilateral relations through dialogue and diplomacy. The meeting follows the recent evacuation of Nigerians from South Africa after a wave of anti-migrant violence and comes amid growing calls across the continent for stronger protection of African migrants and greater accountability for perpetrators of xenophobic attacks. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama and President Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema from Gabon have agreed to deepen bilateral relations through a wide-ranging partnership aimed at boosting trade and regional integration. Following high-level talks in Accra, the two countries plan to leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area (AfCFTA) to expand cooperation in mining, agriculture, energy, security, and digital innovation. From Accra, Nadede Tete brings us the details.
The commitment was announced after bilateral talks in Accra between President John Dramani Mahama and Gabon's President Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema, who is on an official visit to Ghana. At the heart of the discussions was a shared ambition to move beyond traditional trade and build stronger value chains in sectors considered vital to both economies. Mining featured prominently, with the two leaders agreeing to collaborate on responsible mineral extraction, value addition in gold and manganese, petroleum exploration, and the transition to cleaner energy sources. Here's President John Mahama.
Our meeting today takes place against the backdrop of a defining moment for Africa and for the wider international community. While our continent continues to demonstrate remarkable resilience and promise, we also face pressing challenges such as the global economic uncertainty, climate change, food insecurity, public health concerns, and complex security threats. These realities make it imperative for African countries to work more closely together on the basis of African-led solutions.
The partnership also extends to agriculture, where Ghana and Gabon plan to work together on commercial farming, agro-processing, aquaculture, and efforts to tackle illegal fishing. Recognizing growing security challenges in the Gulf of Guinea, both countries also pledged greater cooperation on maritime security, intelligence sharing, and combating piracy and transnational crime. 2 memoranda of understanding were signed during the visit, covering political consultations between the foreign ministries of both countries and diplomatic training to strengthen institutional cooperation. Beyond the economic agenda, the two leaders committed to expanding collaboration in higher education, digital transformation, cybersecurity, public health, climate action, and ecotourism, while reaffirming their support for the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Both governments have directed their ministers to begin work immediately on implementing the agreements, signaling their intention to translate the new partnership into concrete economic and development outcomes. For WADR, Nadedi Tete, Accra.
In Benin, President Wadr has inaugurated the Standing Committee of the National Commission for Legal Reform, a new body tasked with reviewing and modernizing the country's legal framework. The commission is expected to align Benin's laws with emerging economic, technological, and social realities as the government pursues broader institutional reforms. Imo Edet tells us more in this report.
Benin's President Wadr has officially installed members of the Standing Committee of the National Commission for Legal Reform during a ceremony held in Cotonou. The Commission has been tasked with reviewing existing legislation, identifying outdated laws, supporting the drafting of the new legal text, and ensuring the effective implementation of regional community law. Speaking at the ceremony, President Wadr said Benin's legal system must evolve to respond to emerging challenges.
Il s'agit d'identifier.
The objective is to identify within the existing body of legislation provisions that may have become outdated because our customs, practices, and international agreements we have signed have evolved. In short, as the world changes, certain provisions that were relevant yesterday may no longer be relevant today. A few years ago, many of today's challenges simply did not exist. As a result, our current legal framework is often completely silent on these emerging issues affecting our society. The Commission's role is also to identify these legal gaps and make proposals on how they should be addressed.
Propositions pour les adresser.
The President also called for an inclusive reform process involving legal experts, academics, civil society and professional organizations, pledging the resources needed for the Commission to carry out its work. The initiative forms part of Benin's wider governance reforms aimed at strengthening public institutions and creating a legal framework better suited to the country's long-term economic and social development.
Imo Edet with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Here in Senegal, the government has taken a major step towards integrating national languages into its education system with the validation of its first national language policy document. The framework is expected to guide future language policy, promoting the use of indigenous languages in teaching while preserving the country's cultural heritage. Sankule Janko reports.
Senegal has validated its first national language policy document, a strategic framework designed to strengthen the role of national languages in education, knowledge transmission, and cultural preservation. The document was reviewed during a technical validation workshop in Dakar, chaired by the Minister of National Education, Mustafa Mamba Gracie, bringing together linguists, researchers, education experts, civil society representatives, and development partners. Authorities say the policy aims to improve learning by allowing children to begin their education in the language they understand best before gradually introducing other languages, including French. Officials believe this approach will promote inclusion, improve learning outcomes, and better reflect Senegal's linguistic diversity. The initiative forms part of a broader education reforms under the government's Senegal 2050 vision, which seeks to build a more inclusive and competitive education system while recognizing national languages as an important pillar of identity, innovation, and national development.
Sankule Janko with that report. The Gambian President Adama Barrow has unveiled a $1 million Skills, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Fund to expand vocational training and youth-led businesses. The program will support upgrades in 25 technical and vocational institutions, while 18 partner institutions will receive funding for skill development programs. It will also provide support to 75 youth startups annually, linking practical training with job creation and entrepreneurship opportunities. From Banjul, Rose Samara Kate reports.
Backed by the World Bank through the Resilience, Inclusive Skills and Equity RISE project, the funding includes $33.8 million for 25 technical and vocational institutions to upgrade workshops, provide facilities, and enhance the quality of training. Another $49.9 million will provide scholarships and stipends for more than 1,300 young people, with the focus on sectors such as agriculture, information technology, engineering, tourism, and the creative industry. Launching the $83.8 million initiative, President Adama Barrow said the investment underscores his government's commitment to equipping young Gambians with practical skills for employment and entrepreneurship.
The employability and job creation indication of those beneficiaries are positive. I am encouraged by the broad interest this initiative has generated across the TVEC ecosystem in the country.
World Bank Residence Representative Franklin Mutahana described the initiative as a major investment in human capital, saying strong vocational training is key to creating jobs and building long-term economic resilience.
The real question is not only how many participants completed training, but whether that training was relevant, of sufficient quality, and whether it helped young people move into employment or self-employment.
Beneficiary students welcome the support, noting that earlier beneficiaries achieved an 84% employment rate, while the program helped reduce the financial burden on many Gambian families. For WADR, Rose Samara Kates, Banjo.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our headlines. Diplomatic officials from Nigeria and South Africa hold high-level talks in Abuja over recent wave of xenophobic attacks. Benin launches major overhaul of its legal system as President Romuald Wadani installs a new law reform commission. Senegal adopts first national language policy, paving way for greater use of indigenous languages in schools. And the Gambia unveils a multi-million-dollar fund to expand vocational training and support youth entrepreneurship. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and the sports stories. Please stay with us.
Bringing you the facts beyond the headlines from Monrovia, Liberia. This is Abraham Parker. Stay tuned to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
Let's bring you some health news. The Liberian government has launched a nationwide hepatitis B vaccination campaign to eliminate the viral disease as a public health threat. The campaign is expected to improve access to vaccination, encourage early testing and treatment, as well as strengthen the country's response to one of the leading causes of liver disease. The campaign launched on Tuesday to mark World Hepatitis Day, observed this year under the global theme, Hepatitis, Let's Break It Down, and Liberia's national slogan, Take Action. WADL's Abraham Parker completes the story.
The initiative led by the Ministry of Health to do the National AIDS and STI Control Program seeks to boost popular awareness, expand testing, and improve access to treatment. Program Manager Dr. Jonathan Flomo warned that thousands of people are at risk if infections are not detected and treated.
Hepatitis B is spread through unprotected sexual intercourse, through drug use by using one needle, through blood transfusion. We need to take action. We need to prevent ourselves.
For the Assistant Minister for Vital Statistics at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Anthony Fortune, World Hepatitis Day provides an opportunity for country to reaffirm its commitment to eliminating viral disease as a public health threat. Organizers have urged Liberians to get screened, stressing that early diagnosis is key to preventing transmission and ensuring timely treatment, as Liberia's surveillance system does not yet provide a complete nationwide count on infections. A recent WHO-supported report on Liberia found notable hepatitis B prevalence, including 34% among men, 25% among uniformed service personnel, and 20.1% among female sex workers. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
The United Nations has issued an alert warning that the world is no longer facing a temporary water crisis, but a far more dangerous reality. Describing the situation as water bankruptcy, the UN says humanity has crossed a critical threshold where water is being consumed faster than nature can replenish it. The Global Water Bankruptcy 2026 report explains that the loss of water leaves ecosystems permanently damaged. Veronique Njai reports.
The 2026 report paints a troubling picture, indicating that since 1970, the world has lost 410 million hectares of wetlands. Glaciers have shrunk by more than 30%, and 70% of the world's major aquifers are in long-term decline. For Africa, the warning is even more pressing. More than 400 million people still lack access to safe drinking water as climate change, rapid urbanization, aging infrastructure, and decades of underinvestment place unprecedented strain on already fragile water systems, from prolonged drought in the Horn of Africa to declining river flows in the south. Key basins including the Nile, Niger River, Limpopo, and Zambezi, one of Africa's great waterways, are under mounting pressure. At the same time, expanding cities, ineffective agriculture, mining, and industry are driving demand beyond sustainable limits. The report warns that without major investment in climate-resilient infrastructure, nature-based solutions, and better water management, Africa could face a prolonged era of structural water scarcity, signaling that the continent is already shifting from a water crisis to what experts describe as water bankruptcy. According to the Global Water Bankruptcy 2026 report, nearly three-quarters of the world's population lives in water-insecure countries.
Veronique Njai with those details.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
As ECOWAS prepares to host its first West Africa Water Forum, the International Committee of the Red Cross is calling for greater protection of water resources in conflict zones. The ICRC warns that attacks on water infrastructure and the use of water as a weapon are worsening humanitarian crises, particularly across the Sahel, leaving millions without reliable access to safe water. Ahead of the September forum in Abidjan, WADR spoke to Eleonore Asomani, the ICRC's regional spokesperson, about why protecting water must become a regional priority.
People living specifically in conflict zones or surrounded by armed violence are particularly vulnerable to water scarcity. Indeed, we've seen water supplies and essential infrastructures providing water being targeted. And this is when we do have to be alarmed at the fact that sometimes water is used as a war weapon. But we also see water or water infrastructures being collateral damage during conflict. And the result of that is, of course, that water is life. And so that without any water, for instance, you are going to be at the risk of illnesses such as cholera. Hospitals are not going to be functioning anymore if you don't have clean water. You cannot be cleaning wounds properly. But also you have higher risks for women and girls, since they are the ones who usually go and fetch water. They have to go further away and they're exposed to violence. And finally, there's the risk linked to agriculture. So if there's no water, nothing can grow, which means that there's no food.
That said, what is the water situation like, or the water crisis like, in the Sahel?
It's true that in the Sahel, we have the particular situation that it is basically a vicious circle. Water, or the lack of, is a source of conflict, but also the consequences of armed conflict or armed violence. For example, prolonged droughts reduces access to water. So when you have very little rain or on a very short period of time in the year, that means that livestock or cattle owner have to look for water and for grass elsewhere, which also means that they might stumble upon the land that is not theirs, and this would make them potentially compete with other cattle owners. So that really, really is a problem because it can provoke tension, so conflicts, but also armed violence displaces people, and it displaces them in places where they may not have access to water, to clean water, or to places where that same conflict has already damaged or made obsolete the water infrastructures.
What concrete outcomes does the ICRC expect?
The ICRC is really hoping for innovative, flexible and multi-year financing that would allow us to provide specifically in conflict zones. And that doesn't always come as an emergency. It also comes as prevention, so preventing the collapse of those water systems to make sure that the gap between the needs and that aid is not as big. The second thing maybe could be to formally recognize that actually armed violence and armed conflict are a major obstacle to that access to water and integrate that water and conflict dimension to the conclusion of that conference, because we need to remember that targeting water systems, water infrastructures is actually prohibited by international humanitarian law.
Now, how can diplomatic commitments be translated into real protection for civilians on the ground?
So we have actors that are on the ground and that have the ability to help in those situations. So the International Committee of the Red Cross has, for instance, a unit that is in charge of assisting people who don't have access of water. For instance, in 2025, we've assisted 32 million people worldwide. So it is possible, and that is translated in the distribution of emergency water, the rehabilitation of water, sanitation, and energy infrastructures, and always working hand in hand with local authorities. Earlier, we mentioned the Sahel in Mali in 2025. More than 160,000 people were able to access clean water thanks to infrastructures that were either constructed or rehabilitated by the International Committee of the Red Cross, and always in support of local authorities.
Eleonore Asomani is the regional spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross ICRC, and she was our guest. time now for the sports stories. And Nigeria Super Falcons are looking to bounce back at the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON after a surprise 3-2 opening defeat to Malawi. Head coach Justin Madugu says the team remains focused on qualifying for the knockout stage and has urged his players to respond strongly in their next fixture. At the Glasgow 2026 Commonwealth Games, Kenya has continued its dominance in middle distance athletics, sweeping the men's 3,000-meter steeplechase podium with gold, silver, and bronze. Also at the Commonwealth Games, Kenya's Zablon Ekwam made an impressive start to his men's 200-meter campaign by winning his opening round heat to advance to the next stage. In Tanzania, Young Africans Yanga SC have strengthened their attack ahead of the 2026-2027 season with new signings, giving head coach Mankoba Mgiti a welcome selection dilemma as the mainland champions prepare for domestic and continental competitions. Ghanaian forward Mohamed Husseini is recovering after reportedly being attacked and robbed in Brussels. The incident has drawn widespread concern, with supporters and fellow footballers sending messages of support as he recuperates. And we've come to the end of Newslink at this time on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek for the technical assistance and Maudo Juf for monitoring our streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Remember, you can download our mobile app WADR on the App Store and the Play Store. You can also talk to us and follow us on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at WADR English. Coming up next is a rebroadcast of It's You Speaking. My name is Deborah Amuo. Good evening. We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.